Clara Jennings's hand trembled slightly as she counted out the last of her coins onto the counter. "Stage fare to Dry Creek," she said, voice low. "1 seat." The clerk didn't look up. He swept the coins into a drawer with the back of his hand. "Leaves in 10. You'll ride roof till Gilla Bend?" She nodded once. Behind her, a man cleared his throat loudly. Impatient, she stepped aside fast, clutching the faded carpetbag to her side, then moved toward the benches out front, where the sun was already burning the dust silver. She sat stiffly, the wooden slats digging through her skirt. The newspaper cutting in her coat pocket felt like it weighed 10 pounds. Wanted a Raoul Abel EALP housekeeper or cook, capable with livestock a plus, willing to relocate. Discretion expected. Miss C. Jennings, Seco General Delivery, Tucson. There'd been 3 replies. One offered employment at a saloon east of Bisbee, where housekeeping was spelled wrong and the pay was too high. The second had no name, just a hotel address and a time to meet after dark. She'd burned both letters in the stove behind the boarding house. The third had come with $20 and a hand-drawn map. "Miss Jennings, what you asked for?" "I can't give what I need. Most folks don't think to ask for. Come be my partner instead. L. Barrett, Dry Creek." The coin was already spent. The letter remained, folded soft at the creases, pulled out too many times to count. A man walking past the bench stopped and looked her over once. She stared straight ahead. "Miss," he said, "I'm not interested." He smirked and tipped his hat anyway. "Didn't say what I was offering. I still ain't interested." He moved on. She watched the dust cling to his boots, then vanish into the white heat. The stagecoach rolled in with a high rattle, 6 horses blowing hard in the heat. The driver barely slowed before calling names. Clara stood before hers was spoken. She climbed up behind the coachman without help, felt the heat of the iron railing against her palms, and settled into the bench. Her skirt stuck to the wood. The coach lurched forward, and Tucson began to fall behind. By the second day, her skin was cracked from wind and sun. She shared the inside bench with a Bible seller from El Paso and a widow with 5 canaries in a wire cage. Neither spoke much. The man's Bible had the corners worn smooth. The widow kept humming something tuneless. Clara stared out the window, her stomach tight. Sage and yellow grass rolled past, interrupted now and then by a clump of cattle, a dry riverbed, or the stubs of burned-out fences. Each mile south added to the question. What kind of man sends money to a stranger and asks for a partner? Instead, she touched the map again, fingers tracing the route, Tucson to Gilla Bend, then Gilla Bend to Dry Creek, a town so small it wasn't on any printed map, only this one, drawn in dark pencil with crooked arrows and a small X where Barrett Place was marked. "Looks like you're headed toward nowhere." The Bible seller said, watching her. "I used to preach that way. Nothing but snakes and failed ranches." She folded the map without answering. He chuckled. "Don't say I didn't warn you." The depot at Dry Creek was newer than she expected. A little station painted yellow, with 2 doors and no clock. The platform boards were uneven. Dust blew through in dry gusts. The driver helped her down and set her bag beside her. That's all. Someone meeting you?" "I hope so," he grunted. "If not, Tom at the livery might give you a ride." Barrett Place is 5 miles north. Clara stepped out of the sun and onto the porch of the general store. A bell over the door rang as a man walked out, carrying a sack of feed. Inside, the clerk glanced up once, then ignored her. She waited 10 minutes. Then 20. The street was mostly quiet. 2 boys tossing stones near the well. A man washing his face with water from a trough. The sun inched past the awning and touched her boots. A woman stepped out from the side of the store, wiping her hands on a flour sack apron. She had the square-shouldered look of someone who'd carried feed sacks longer than most men. Her gray hair was braided and coiled high on her head. "You look like you missed your ride," the woman said. "I'm waiting on Levy Barrett." The woman's face didn't change, but she hesitated just long enough. "You Clara Jennings?" "Yes, ma'am." "Thought you'd be older." Clara didn't answer. The woman nodded toward the bench. "Best wait out of the sun. He'll come." It was nearly half an hour later when the wagon came down the main street, 2 horses, 1 driver, and someone else in the back. Clara stood, The girl in the wagon bed couldn't be more than 16. She wore pants, a loose shirt, and no shoes. Her hair was tangled in half, cut, like someone had taken shears to it and stopped halfway. The wagon pulled up. The man driving set the brake and jumped down in one smooth motion. "Miss Jennings." She nodded, watching the girl in the back. "I'm Levy Barrett. Sorry I'm late." Mool threw a shoe. She stepped forward slowly. "You brought company." He glanced back. "This is Daisy. She was staying at the Cooper place. They needed room for lambing, so I offered my bunkhouse for a spell. Thought it was temporary." Clara didn't move. "You didn't mention her in your letter." "No," he said, and that was all. The girl hopped down without waiting. She didn't look at Clara, just grabbed a canvas bag and walked toward the saloon like she owned the dirt. Clara said nothing. Levy cleared his throat. "I'll take your bag." She didn't hand it over. "Your letter said you needed a partner. Not a rescue project." "You're right. She was supposed to leave 3 days ago. And she didn't." He met her eyes. "Not yet." She finally let go of the bag. He lifted it gently into the wagon bed. "Do I ride in the back too?" "No," he said. "You ride up front." "But it's your choice." Clara looked at the porch behind her, empty. The clerk inside hadn't looked out once. She stepped up into the wagon and sat stiffly, hands folded in her lap. The horses started forward. They didn't speak for most of the drive. The land around them was wide and brittle. Mesquite scrub and sandstone outcrops, dry arroyos that hadn't seen water in weeks. The heat was a weight on her back. Sweat ran down the side of her ribs beneath her dress. "Finally," she said. "Why me?" Levi didn't turn. "You were the only one who didn't sound like they were running from something." She considered that. "Maybe I am. Then I guess we'll find out." They passed a split rail fence. Several boards were blackened, warped like something had burned there and been left to die. "Someone tried to run off a calf last week," Levy said. "Didn't know I was home." She looked again. The shape of the charring was odd, too sharp, too circular, like a brand had been pressed into the wood and left to smoke. But she didn't ask, and he didn't explain. As they crested the ridge, she saw the outline of a house in the distance. Long and low, with a sloped roof and a lean-to on the side. Levy said, "We'll be there in 20. She didn't answer. The wagon rolled on, and the girl's canvas bag still sat in the back, half unzipped and empty. "Who's the girl in the back?" Clara asked, already knowing she'd regret the answer. Levy didn't answer right away. "She's no one's girl," he said finally, "least of all mine." They rode in silence the rest of the way. The land flattened out past the ridge, revealing a patchwork of fenced pastures, some with cattle grazing, some empty. The house came into view. A one-story adobe with a covered porch and smoke rising from a stovepipe. A windmill creaked lazily in the dry air behind the barn. He pulled the wagon alongside the house and set the brake. "You can stay in the old bunkhouse for now." Just there. He pointed past the barn to a small structure set apart from the main house by about 100 yards. "Built it for hired help. Has a bed, stove, water barrel. It's yours while we figure things out." Clara climbed down without a word. She looked toward the bunkhouse, then back at him. "And Daisy," he said, unloading her carpet bag. "Not ideal. But she insisted. She looks half-starved." "She is," he said, voice flat. "Came through on a freight wagon 2 weeks ago. Said she was looking for her uncle in Prescott. Didn't make it far. And you took her in." He met her eyes. "Wouldn't you?" Clara didn't answer. She took her bag and started toward the bunkhouse. The door creaked on its hinges but opened easily inside. The place was plain but clean. Bed in the corner, stove, chair, table, small window, a water barrel in the corner, and a narrow shelf holding a lantern and 2 tins of beans. She set her bag down on the bed and turned to find Levi still at the doorway. "I'll bring you supper around sundown," he said. "I can manage my own cooking." His mouth pulled tight, like he wanted to say more, but thought better of it. "All right, then. Holler if you need anything." She watched him go, then shut the door. By dusk, she'd swept the floor, started a fire in the stove, and unpacked her meager belongings. She set her mother's Bible on the shelf beside the bed and hung her 2 dresses on the wall pegs. The lantern burned soft yellow, as she sliced potatoes for a skillet fry. A knock on the door made her pause. Daisy stood outside, barefoot, arms crossed tight over her chest up close. She looked even younger. Dirt streaked her cheeks and her eyes were sharp, wary. "You the new one." Clara wiped her hands on her apron. "Name's Clara. She sends for women, you know," Daisy said. Clara leaned against the doorframe. "What do you mean? They don't always stay." "You planning to?" Daisy's jaw twitched. "Don't think I'm the one should be worried." Then she turned and walked off toward the barn, disappearing into the growing dark. Clara shut the door and bolted it. The next morning, Clara rose before dawn. She lit the stove, boiled coffee, and dressed in her plainest calico. She found the tack room behind the barn and took a brush to the gray mare in the nearest stall. The animal tolerated her touch with lazy indifference. "You ride." Levy's voice came from behind her. She turned, enough to stay in the saddle. He nodded. "Good. I've got 3 colts that need training. You pick one and start working it." She blinked. "Just like that? You came to work, didn't you?" He led her out to the corral, where 3 young horses shifted nervously behind a makeshift fence. He pointed to a bay with a white star. "That one's Reuben. He's strong, but doesn't trust easy." Clara studied the colt. "Neither do I." Levi chuckled once, almost surprised. "Then you'll get along fine." She stepped into the pen slow and steady, keeping her hands visible. Reuben snorted and backed away, hooves stirring the dirt. She kept her distance, letting him circle. Behind her she heard Levy say, "I'll be fixing fence line up north. Holler if he throws you." "I won't. I mean it. I've already had 1 girl run off bleeding. Don't need another." She turned, but he was already walking away. By midday, her arms ached from rope work and dust coated her throat. Reuben had let her lay a blanket on his back, but still flinched at the saddle. Progress. She led him to the trough and let him drink, rubbing his neck with slow circles. His flanks trembled beneath her hand. From the barn loft, she heard a thump, like something heavy dropping. She followed the sound and climbed the ladder. The loft was empty except for hay bales and an old quilt, no sign of Daisy. Then she noticed a pair of boots sitting neatly by the wall, small, worn, patched at the heel, and beside them, a book. She picked it up. The cover was faded red. Inside, a name written in loopy ink, S. Ellison, not Daisy, not even close. She tucked the book under her arm and climbed down. That night, Levi invited her to supper. She brought the book with her. "Ever seen this before?" she asked as they ate. Levi frowned at the name. "No. She's not who she says she is." She didn't say much at all. Clara set the book on the table. "Then maybe you should ask." "She's scared." "She's lying." Levi leaned back, chewing slowly. "You want to throw her out? I want to know who's sleeping 30 yards from me with secrets and no shoes." He didn't respond. They finished the meal in silence afterward. Clara stepped outside. The wind had picked up. Stars pushed through the black sky like pinholes. She heard footsteps behind her. Daisy stood at the edge of the porch. "You went through my things," she said. Clara didn't flinch. "What's your real name?" "It doesn't matter." "It does to me." Daisy's face twisted. "You think he sent for you because he wants a worker." Clara said nothing. "He wants a wife." Daisy spat, like the others. Just didn't say it out loud this time. Clara's pulse ticked once, sharp in her throat. "What others? You're not the first. You won't be the last." Then she turned and ran off into the dark. The next day, Clara found the bunkhouse door unlatched. She'd locked it the night before. Nothing inside was missing, but her boots were damp, like someone had poured water into them and let it sit. She didn't tell Levi. Instead, she worked Reuben hard that morning, pushing the colt until sweat darkened his chest. Her body ached with it. But she didn't stop. By the time she unsaddled him, her hands were blistered. In the barn, she caught sight of something half buried behind a stack of hay. She reached down and pulled it free, a bracelet, silver, tarnished. The clasp was bent. On the underside, 2 letters AM. She ran her thumb over the engraving. Then she noticed a dark smear along the edge, old, dried, almost black, not rust. Clara slipped the bracelet into her pocket. Later that afternoon, she rode into town for supplies. At the general store, the same woman from the porch, Miriam Tuttle watched her with narrowed eyes. "You're still here," Miriam said. "Still working. Funny. The others didn't last past 2 weeks?" Clara didn't ask. She paid for salt, coffee, flour. As she stepped outside, Deputy Hank Rook leaned against the hitching post, arms crossed. "Miss Jennings," he said. She stopped. "Deputy. You staying out at Barrett's place, for now?" His eyes didn't blink. "He tell you about Alice Munro?" Clara froze. "Didn't think so." Hank said. "She was the last one. Answered his letter same as you. Got off the stage same way. Stayed about 3 weeks. And then vanished," he said. "No note. No goodbyes. But her Bible's still in the bunkhouse." Clara said nothing. "People disappear out here?" Hank said. "Just seems to happen more often around that place." He tipped his hat and walked away. Clara rode back at sunset, the bracelet in her pocket, heavy as stone. Reuben snorted when he saw her, but didn't flinch as she brushed him down. The bunkhouse felt colder that night. The bolt clicked loud when she slid it into place. She pulled the bracelet out and laid it on the table beside her mother's Bible. Outside, a dog barked once, then went quiet, and somewhere beyond the barn, a shape moved in the dark. "If she's dead," Miriam said, "you'll hang for it unless you run." Clara waited until sunrise before confronting him. The bunkhouse had felt too small all night. She'd barely slept, one hand under her pillow, wrapped around the handle of the old kitchen knife Miriam had given her. She hadn't asked why Miriam kept knives under her flour sacks. The woman didn't explain things unless she had to. She found Livy behind the barn, already working. He was repairing a broken hinge on the coral gate, sleeves rolled up, hammer swinging in rhythm with his breath. "I want to know about Alice Munro," Clara said. Without preamble, Livy looked up, wiped sweat from his brow. He didn't ask how she knew the name. She answered a letter like mine. Clara went on. "Came here, lived in the bunkhouse, then vanished. She left." Levi said simply. "Didn't say where. Just took the money and caught a wagon out. Her Bible's still here." "She forgot it. She never told you goodbye?" "No," he said. "Just gone." Clara held up the bracelet. "And this?" "Found it buried in the hay behind the barn. Has her initials." Levi frowned at it. "Never seen it before." "I don't believe you." He set the hammer down slowly. "Then maybe this ain't the place for you." Clara stared at him, heart hammering. "That's your answer?" "You came here free," he said. "You can leave the same way." He turned back to the hinge. She walked away before she said something she couldn't take back. The horses felt it. Reuben was jittery that morning, skittish even with the blanket he'd grown used to. He pulled away from the lead rope twice. The third time, Clara let go and let him circle the pen until he wore himself down. Daisy watched from the fence post, chewing something and spitting it into the dirt. "You and him have a fight?" she asked. "Don't you have something better to do?" "I like watching people lose," Daisy said. "Makes me feel less alone." Clara ignored her. "I saw you go into town yesterday." Daisy went on, talked to the deputy. Clara didn't respond. "He's sweet on you," Daisy said. "You could do worse. You know something about Alice." Clara snapped. Daisy smiled without humor. "I know she screamed her second night here. Woke me up from the barn." "Did he hurt her?" "I didn't say that." Clara climbed over the fence and walked away. But Daisy called after her. "Careful, Clara. You ask too many questions, and folks might start asking about you." That afternoon, Clara saddled the mare and rode the north fence line. The land stretched dry and unbroken, fence posts leaning under their own weight. She mended 2 breaks, hammering staples into weathered wood, hands blistered and sore. When she stopped for water, she saw it. Out past the ridge, smoke, not much, just a thin black thread rising into the hot sky. She tied the mare and walked, boots crunching over dry scrub and stone. The closer she got, the more she smelled it. Burned wood and something else, bitter, oily. At the source, she found a small fire pit, still smoldering fresh. Someone had dumped water on it and left in a hurry. Half, buried in the ash, was something that shouldn't have been there. A woman's scarf, torn. One corner burned through. The fabric was soft, expensive, not local, and stitched along the edge, barely visible. Alice Munro. Clara backed away fast, heart pounding. The fire hadn't been meant for warmth. Someone was burning evidence. She looked around. Nothing, no prints, no horse tracks. Then something caught her eye. Scratched into the bark of a nearby mesquite, 3 vertical slashes, clean, deliberate. Clara didn't touch them. She rode back hard, dust choking her throat. At the bunkhouse, she packed fast, journal, Bible, the bracelet, the scarf. She shoved everything into her carpetbag and stepped outside. And froze. Deputy Hank Rourke stood in the yard, one hand resting on his belt. His other hand held his hat. "I need you to come with me," he said. "Why?" "There's a body out past the arroyo," he said. "Young girl. Barefoot. Throat torn open." Clara dropped the bag. "Is it Daisy?" "Can't say yet. I saw her this morning." "Then you might be the last person who did." Her pulse thudded. "You think I think you were living 50 yards from a girl who turned up dead in the desert." Hank said, "And I think this town's already seen one woman vanish without answers." Clara stared at him. He added, voice lower now, "Don't make me drag you, Miss Jennings. I'm not in the mood to be polite." The jail was small. Just 2 cells, a desk, and a cot in the corner. Clara sat on the bench, wrists resting on her knees, while Hank poured coffee and said nothing for a long time. Finally, he handed her the cup. "Tell me what you know." She told him about the bracelet, the scarf, the burned fire pit, about the initials, about Daisy's warnings. When she finished, Hank sat back in his chair, jaw tight. "She never gave a last name," he said. "No one in town remembers seeing her before." "Could have been anyone." "You think Levy?" "I think Levy's a man who doesn't ask questions when it's easier not to." Clara swallowed hard. "So what happens now?" He stood. "I'll ride out there in the morning, see the place myself." "You're staying here tonight." "I haven't done anything." "Then you got nothing to worry about," he said. But he didn't meet her eyes. She lay on the cot that night, staring at the ceiling beams. Dust drifted in the lantern light. The jail smelled like old sweat and horses. She didn't sleep. Just after midnight, someone walked past the window, a shadow, slow and careful. Then a knock on the back door. Miriam. Hank opened it and stepped out with her. They spoke in hushed voices. Clara sat up, straining to hear. When Hank came back in, his face was darker. He unlocked the door to her cell. "Get your things." "Why?" he said. "Miriam says you were at her place before dawn. She vouches for you." "I wasn't." "I know," he said, "but she says you were." Clara stared. Why would she lie? He didn't answer. He just handed her the bag and opened the door. Back at the ranch, the bunkhouse felt colder. Levy stood near the porch when she arrived. His jaw was clenched. "What the hell's going on?" "She's dead," Clara said. His face went pale. "Daisy?" Clara nodded. "I didn't even know she was gone." Clara didn't respond. She went inside and shut the door. She didn't sleep. In the morning, Miriam came, holding a basket of eggs. "You're going to be blamed," the older woman said, setting the basket down. "Doesn't matter what's true." "I didn't do it." "Doesn't matter," Miriam repeated. "You're a stranger. You're a woman. And you're in the middle of a place that doesn't like either." Clara sat down at the table. "Why'd you lie for me?" Miriam didn't blink. "Because I've seen how this ends otherwise." Clara nodded slowly. Miriam pulled something from her coat and slid it across the table. A folded sheet of paper, legal looking, a signature line at the bottom. Clara unfolded it. "A guardianship agreement for a child." "What is this?" she asked. "My niece's girl," Miriam said. "She's coming from Kansas next month. I'm too old, too busy. But the court won't place her unless someone has standing." "A woman, tied to land." Clara stared. "You signed this," Miriam said. "Or I'll vouch for you again. As many times as it takes." "That's not a favor," Clara said. "No," Miriam said. "It's a trade." She turned the bracelet over and saw the dried blood beneath the clasp. The wind came up hard that morning, scattering feet across the yard and snapping one of the clotheslines off its post. Clara chased a pillowcase halfway to the barn before it caught on a fence post. She held it to her chest, breathing through dust and grit, then walked it back to the line with slow, deliberate steps. She hadn't signed Miriam's paper yet. It sat folded in her trunk, underneath her spare dress and the photograph of her father. She couldn't stop thinking about the girl. whoever she was. Coming down from Kansas with no mother, and no say in where she'd end up. That girl didn't know she might be dropped into a place where bodies disappeared behind barns and stories, twisted like dry rope. Clara tied the pillowcase back to the line. The knot held. She wasn't going anywhere, not yet. Levy wasn't in the yard. Not in the barn either. She found him in the east pasture with a fence post on his shoulder and a coil of wire dragging behind him. "I'll help," she said. "You don't have to." She took the post from him anyway. Better than waiting for someone else to die. He stopped, jaw tightening. "I didn't mean." "No," he said. "You're right. It's just, this place keeps swallowing people. Feels like the dirt wants it that way." They worked in silence, trading off hammer and nails. 2 boards were warped. One split clean through. Levy pulled it out and tossed it aside. "You ever been to Prescott?" Clara asked. He looked up once. "Drove cattle up that way." "Why?" "That's where Daisy said she had family." He shook his head. "Never mentioned it to me." "Did she say anything?" "Not much," he admitted. "She didn't trust me." "She had reason." He looked at her then, something hard in his eyes. "What do you think?" Clara didn't answer. She reached for another board. They lunched in the shade of the water tower. Livy passed her a tin of beans and half a biscuit. The horses drank below them, tails swishing flies, steam rising off their backs. Clara said. Levy grunted. "He thinks Alice Munro didn't just leave." "He say I killed her?" "No. Not yet." Levy finished chewing, then wiped his hands on his pants. "You think I did?" Clara watched the wind lift dust from the far ridge. "I think you know more than you say." "I think you're right," he said quietly, "and I think I'm tired of pretending otherwise." He stood. Clara followed. Back at the house, he brought her inside. First time since she'd arrived that he invited her into the front parlor, not the kitchen or the barn. The room smelled of dust and old leather. A bookshelf sagged under the weight of ledgers and yellowing mail. He reached behind the bottom shelf and pulled out a tin box. Inside, folded pages, receipts, letters, a map, then a ledger book, worn along the spine. He handed it to her. She flipped through carefully, lists of feed, cattle tallies, notes on fencing, dates going back 3 years. Then, near the center, a name repeated 3 times: B. Callahan, B. Callahan, deposit pending, B. Callahan, survey claim. Who is he? Benjamin Callahan. Surveyor, came through in 77. Said he was verifying ranch claims for the county. Was he? He was skimming land, Levy said, paying off someone in Tombstone to file false boundaries. Said part of my north pasture was federal land. I knew it wasn't. He offered me a trade. Keep quiet, give him grazing rights, and he'd file the right map. And I reported him, Levy said. He vanished 2 weeks later. Clara held the ledger tighter. And you didn't say anything? Because folks assumed I did it, he said, and because the truth wouldn't have mattered. And now, you're already tied up in this place, and I figured you deserved to know what kind of mess you're sitting in. She stared at the ledger, then at him. I don't think you killed Callahan, she said slowly, but I think you buried the truth so deep it started to rot. Levy nodded once. That's fair. She returned to the bunkhouse with the ledger under her arm. She read it again that night, page by page, until the lantern burned low. Something about the handwriting on certain entries didn't match. She compared loops in the G's, the sharpness of the L's, 2 hands, not just Levi's. She didn't know what it meant yet, but it felt like something important had been hiding in plain sight. She opened the drawer of her trunk and pulled out Miriam's paper. She signed it. The next day dawned colder, the sky heavy with cloud. Clara made breakfast for both of them and carried it to the main house. Levy sat at the kitchen table, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. You cook too? He asked. Sometimes. They ate quietly, coffee strong and bitter between them. Clara watched his hands, wide, rough, capable. The same hands that had buried fence posts and cradled wounded foals. The same hands she'd wondered about more than once in the dark. She pushed the plate back. Let's talk about the barn. What about it? The loft, the boots, the quilt. He nodded slowly. Daisy slept up there. Didn't want to come in. Whose boots were they? He looked at her. Don't know. Clara leaned forward. I think you do. He didn't answer. They walked the pasture together in the afternoon. Wind tugged at the dry grass, and the air smelled like cold metal. At the edge of the south boundary, Levy pointed. That fence line's gone soft. Cattle pushed through last week. I patched it, but it won't hold. I'll get the tools. He caught her arm. No, I'll do it. You stay near the house. Why? Because if someone's been walking this land, burning things, leaving signs, they're getting bolder. You think Daisy saw something? I think someone wanted her quiet, he said. And you're the only other person asking questions. Clara felt the weight of his words settle in her chest. She nodded once. As he walked off, she whispered, Don't get dead. He didn't turn, but she saw his hand lift in acknowledgement. She checked the barn again that night. No new footprints in the dust, no sounds from the loft. The horses were quiet, but near the tack wall, something caught her eye. A strip of fabric tied around a nail, faded blue, not Daisy's shirt, not hers. She pulled it loose and smelled it. Smoke, not firewood, oil smoke. Lamp fuel. She pocketed it. Outside, the moon broke through the cloud for the first time all day. The wind carried the sound of hammering, faint, from far up the ridge. Then it stopped. Back in the bunkhouse, she lit the stove and warmed her hands. The flames crackled low. She opened the ledger again and marked every entry that mentioned fencing. Beside each, she wrote the initials found in the second handwriting: J. T. Not Callahan, not Levy, someone else. The second name hadn't shown up anywhere else in the ledger. She sat back. Then a knock at the door. Levy stood outside, panting. We've got a problem, he said. What now? Someone set fire to the coral. Clara grabbed her coat and followed him. The night air slapped her skin cold. As they rounded the barn, the glow of flame lit the edge of the pasture. One section of the coral, where Reuben had been penned, was already engulfed. Levi rushed in, pulled the gate open. The horse bolted out, unharmed. But the fencing collapsed behind him. Clara ran to the water barrel, filled a bucket, then another. They dozed what they could. But the fence was gone. By the time the flames died, Clara's hands were blistered from the steam. Levy crouched in the dirt, breathing hard. This wasn't lightning, she said. No, he agreed. Clara stood over the blackened ground. In the dirt just outside the burn line, a footprint, small, barefoot. She felt a twist in her chest. It's not over, she said. No, Levy said quietly. And it's not random either. He stood and looked at her fully. I need to know if you're with me or not. Clara didn't hesitate. I'm with you, she said. But only if you stop hiding things. No more shadows, no more half-truths. He nodded once. Deal. They walked back in silence inside the bunkhouse. Clara sat on the edge of the bed and peeled off her gloves. The skin beneath was red and blistered. She looked down at her hands, then at the signed guardianship paper still resting on the table. One more weight added to the pile. You're not the first. You won't be the last. The storm rolled in just after sundown, no warning. Just a sudden snap in the air, the way a bone breaks under strain. Wayne slammed against the bunkhouse so hard it rattled the stovepipe, and the first gust tore her washline clean off the post. Clara had barely bolted the door before the rain came down in sheets, hammering the roof like it had something to prove. Lightning struck not far off, white and close. The oil lantern on her table swayed with the wind howling through the chinks in the wall. Then a knock. 3 hard raps. Clara opened the door to Levy, soaked through, shirt clinging to his arms, hair plastered to his face. The barn roof's lifting, he said. If it goes, the whole west wall might come down. I need help. She grabbed her coat and followed him out into the storm. They fought the wind together. Clara climbing to the loft to throw down extra tarps. Levy bracing the outer supports with salvaged timber. Every time she reached for another rope, her burned palms screamed. She ignored them. By the time they got the last tarp in place, both were dripping, panting, fingers raw. They stood under the eave of the barn, chests heaving. Clara looked at him, hair slick and eyes dark. You're lucky I didn't let it blow away. You didn't strike me as the type to care about horses. He shook his head, the type to walk away when it gets bad. She met his gaze. I've walked away plenty. Just not this time. Back in the main house they toweled off in silence. Levy poured coffee with shaking hands. Clara sat at the kitchen table, steam rising from her coat draped over a chair. "You ever think maybe the land's cursed?" he asked suddenly. "Cursed? This place? Dry Creek. How many vanishings before it becomes a pattern?" Clara sipped her coffee. "Curses don't burn corals. Or slit throats." Levi looked up. "You think it was Callahan?" "No, I think he's dead. But I don't think he was alone." Levy's jaw worked. "What makes you say that?" She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the scrap of cloth she'd found in the barn. The blue strip tied around the nail. "I found this last night. Smells like kerosene. And the handwriting in your ledger. Half those entries weren't yours." He stiffened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying there's another name in that book. Initials JT. You ever hire anyone with those?" He hesitated. "James Thorne." "Who is he?" "Used to work fence lines with me. Quiet. Lived up past the ridge. Drifted in after Callahan disappeared." Clara stared at him. "You didn't think to mention him." "I didn't think he was relevant. He's still around." "I haven't seen him in months." Clara stood. "I want to see where he lived." "Now?" "No," she said, "but soon." The rain didn't let up until well past midnight. Clara had planned to go back to the bunkhouse, but Levy stopped her at the door. "It's flooding out near the low ground," he said. "The path's washed. You'll twist an ankle if you try." "I'll manage." "You can take the bed," he said. "I'll sleep in the chair." She looked at him. "You're sure?" He nodded. "Better than waking up to you half drowned." She changed in the back room, hands trembling a little more than she liked. The bed was wide, clean. Quilt pulled tight. She crawled in, muscles aching. The window rattled softly with wind. Around 2 in the morning, she woke to the sound of footsteps. She opened the door and found Levy crouched by the fire, feeding it wood. "You all right?" she asked. He didn't look at her. "Cher's not built for sleeping." "Neither's this storm." He smiled faintly. "You can take the bed," she offered. "I'll stay on top of the covers." He looked at her a long time. "That wouldn't be proper. And sleeping in pain's not foolish." After a pause he nodded. "All right." They lay stiffly at first, backs turned, no touch. But sometime before dawn, Clara woke to find herself curled against him, his arm resting gently around her waist. She didn't move. She didn't want to. The next morning, they acted like it hadn't happened. Over coffee, Livy went through his livestock notes. Clara pretended to read the newspaper. Though it was 2 weeks old and half wet, after breakfast, she went to town alone. The general store was nearly empty. Just Miriam at the counter and Hank Rourke leaning on a barrel of nails. He tipped his hat. "You look like hell." "I feel like it." "You hear about the tracks?" Clara stiffened. "What tracks?" "South pasture. After the fire. Somebody rode out that way. Barefoot prints beside horse prints. Could be from the girl. Could be. Or someone making it look that way." He studied her. "You sleep all right?" "I slept." "You with Barrett now?" She didn't answer. He pulled something from his coat. Torn page faded at the edges. "I found this near the arroyo where the girl turned up. In the rocks. Took it to Tucson for ink testing." Clara frowned. "Ink testing? Got a friend there." "University man." "Turns out it's Daisy's writing." She took the page. The writing was shaky but legible. "If he finds this, I'm already dead." Then a half-finished line. "He told me what he did to." It ended in a jagged mark, torn or cut, no signature. Clara's throat closed. Hank crossed his arms. "So? Who's—" She didn't speak. "Barrett's ledger's still missing some pages." Hank said. "Think it's worth checking the barn again?" "Maybe. Think it's worth asking what Thorne did before he worked fences." She looked up. "He used to ride with Callahan," Hank said. "And before that, he was a hired gun down in Mesilla." "You want to know why folks vanish around Barrett's land? Start with the men he doesn't talk about." Clara folded the page and slid it into her coat. "Then I'll go looking. Not alone, you won't. I've gone alone most of my life." He leaned in close. "And you're still bleeding from it." Back at the ranch, the ground was slick with leftover mud. Clara found Levy repairing the chicken coop roof. "Did Thorne ever come back after he left?" she asked. He stopped hammering. "No." "You sure?" Not since last spring. Then why did someone burn a coral, leave a scarf, and vanish barefoot toward the ridge? He stared at her. You think it's him? I think someone's been walking this land after dark. Someone who knows where to hide. Levy's face darkened. There's a shack up past the south ridge. Thorne squatted there once. Might still be standing. I want to see it. Tomorrow, he said. Not with the ground this wet. She nodded. He looked at her, voice lower. You all right? She held up her blistered palms. I've been better. He reached for one, gently, then stopped. I'm not who she wrote about. He said. Clara pulled back. Maybe not. But someone is. That night, she reread the journal page, the ledger, the guardianship papers. All of it. One girl dead. One woman vanished. One man who kept too many things quiet for too long. And somewhere out past the ridge, a shack. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Just before dawn, Livy knocked once and cracked the door. Ride out with me, he said, to the shack, to the past. She followed. What was she so afraid of? Clara asked. Hank didn't blink. You. They rode out just after sunrise, the world still soaked and quiet from the storm. The horses kicked up wet dirt along the southern trail, hooves squelching in the mud. Levy led the way, shoulders tense, eyes always scanning the tree line. Clara kept pace behind him, her coat pulled tight against the morning chill. Neither had said much since leaving. Every time she tried to speak, the weight of what she didn't know pressed harder. The trail narrowed past the ridge, winding through chaparral and pine. By the time the sun cleared the hills, they reached a split in the trail where the trees thinned and the ground turned rocky. There, Levy said, pointing with his chin, up ahead half, hidden behind a tangle of mesquite, stood a cabin, or what used to be one. The roof sagged. The door hung sideways from a single hinge. Shutters flapped loose in the wind. Smoke stains blackened one corner of the frame, like someone had tried to burn it and failed. They dismounted in silence. Clara stepped through the doorway, boots crunching on charred boards. The inside smelled of mold and ash. An overturned chair lay rotting in the corner. A crate of rusted tools sat beneath a collapsed shelf. Scattered across the floor were empty tins, broken glass, and scraps of paper long faded by weather. But in the center of the room, someone had made a fire recently. The ash was clean, the stone ring intact, and beside it a bootprint, clear, fresh. Clara knelt beside it. Not yours. No, Levy said. She picked up a strip of cloth nearby. Same blue fabric as the one in the barn. Her heart thumped. Someone's been here. Recently. Levy crouched beside her. Thorne. Clara shook her head. Maybe. Or someone else who doesn't want to be found. They searched in silence, finding nothing more than rot and old wood. But in the back room, under a loose floorboard, Clara found it, a journal, wrapped in canvas, bound with twine. She untied it carefully. The name on the first page stopped her cold, Alice Munro. She opened it to the middle and scanned a line. He said he'd kill me if I spoke. Said no one would believe a woman who answered a stranger's letter. Her hands trembled. Another entry. There's another man, quiet, older, watches me, talks to Levi when he thinks I'm asleep. She looked up at him. Did you know she kept this? He shook his head. No. You weren't alone out here, were you? No. He admitted. I didn't want to see it then. He came and went. Said he was helping. I let him. She stood. You let him get close to her. I didn't know. You didn't ask. He had no answer. They rode back fast, dirt flying under hooves, sun beating down hard. By the time they reached the ranch, Hank was already there, his horse tied to the post, dust on his coat. He looked up as they dismounted. You find it? Clara held up the journal. We did. He took it, flipping through. This'll help. It's not enough, Clara said. We need to know who the second man was. Hank nodded. I asked around. Thorne left Dry Creek a year ago, but he had a brother, John. Never filed property. Real quiet. Real hard to pin. Clara felt her pulse quicken. JT. Exactly. Levi rubbed his face. I remember now. He came by once asking about work. I told him I didn't have any. He left. But not far. Clara said. Hank folded the journal. I'm heading east. Talk to the sawmill crews. Someone's seen him. I'm coming with you, Clara said. No, you're not. I'm not sitting here while another man like that walks free. Hank held her gaze. He's not your burden to carry. Clara didn't blink. He's mine if I let him hurt someone else. They left that afternoon. Levi stayed behind. Someone had to tend the ranch. Someone had to keep up the lie that nothing was wrong. Clara rode beside Hank in silence for the first mile. Then she asked, "Why'd you help me?" Hank spat into the dust. Because the last woman who cried for help got buried under excuses. They reached the first mill camp by dusk. Rough men, rougher voices, timber stacked like bones. Nobody friendly. Hank asked around. Most shook their heads. But one man, younger, missing 2 fingers, stopped when he heard the name, Thorne. He said, "You mean old Johnny. Worked North Line last fall. Slept in the shed behind the supply post. Still around?" Hank asked. The man shrugged. "Heard he pulled out after the fire." "Hollow. Lone?" "No," the man said. "Got a girl with him now." Clara's breath caught. "What girl?" The man looked at her, then at Hank. "Don't know her name. Young. Walks with a limp, doesn't talk much." Hank cursed under his breath. "Daisy." Clara's voice was flat. "She's alive." "Maybe," the man said. "But she don't look it." They rode through the night, reached Sand Hollow by dawn. Hank went into the camp. Clara waited. Minutes passed. Then 10, she paced. Then he came back, face pale. "She's here," he said. "He's got her locked in the back of a freight cart. Chains." Clara was already moving. "Let's go." They didn't wait. Burst through the camp with guns drawn. The freight cart sat under a canvas tarp behind a stack of crates. Hank fired a warning shot. The camp scattered. Clara yanked the door open. Inside, Daisy, pale, shaking, ice wild. She flinched when Clara reached for her, but then her eyes focused. "Clara." Clara cut the chain, pulled her out, held her close. "It's all right," she whispered. "I've got you." Behind them, Hank tackled a man trying to run, John Thorne, face sunken, eyes hollow. He didn't fight, just stared at Clara like she'd come to kill him. "You should have stayed quiet," he said. She stepped closer. "You should have burned with the rest," he whispered. Clara looked down at Daisy's arms and saw the brand burned into her skin. The brand was no accident. It had been seared into the soft skin beneath Daisy's collarbone. An ugly jagged C, with a slash through it, crude and angry. Clara reached out instinctively, but Daisy recoiled, pulling the threadbare blanket tighter around her shoulders. Hank crouched nearby, keeping one eye on Thorne, who was cuffed to the axle of the supply wagon. His lip was split from the takedown. He hadn't said a word since they'd dragged him down. Clara turned to Hank. "What is it?" "That mark." Hank's face was grim. "Chattel brand. From the old Crooked Spur Ranch. Burned down 6 years ago." Clara frowned. "I thought that place was abandoned." "It was," he said, "after the killings." "What killings?" Hank stood, exhaling through his nose. 8 girls. All hired as house help, all vanished. One found in a well. Rest never turned up. She stared at him. "No one was ever charged," he added. "Owner died in a fire. But some folks always said he had help." Clara looked back at Daisy. Her eyes were open, but not fully seeing. "How long was she with him?" "Too long," Hank said quietly. They rode back with Daisy wrapped in Levy's old coat. Barely speaking, she clung to Clara with both arms as if she might be ripped away again. Thorne rode behind, slumped and cuffed, tied to Hank's saddle like cargo. Every mile felt heavier than the last. When they reached Dry Creek, Miriam was already waiting on the porch of the bunkhouse, arms crossed, apron dusted with flour. Clara lifted Daisy off the horse. The girl didn't protest, just leaned her head against Clara's chest and let herself be carried inside. Miriam followed them in, shut the door behind her, and said nothing, just started a pot of broth and laid out a blanket near the stove. It was a long time before Daisy spoke. "He said I was already marked," she whispered. Clara knelt beside her. "You're not." Daisy didn't look up. "He said nobody would take me back after what he did." "They were wrong," Clara said. "Every damn one of them." The girl didn't cry. She just stared into the flames. That night, Hank locked Thorne in the jail alone, left the lantern lit, so his shadow stretched across the wall like something twisted and reaching. Clara stood outside the cell, arms crossed, watching him. "You helped Callahan," she said. He smiled, lip bleeding again. "I did more than that. You branded girls like cattle." I didn't brand them, he said calmly. Callahan did. I just kept them quiet. Where are the others? He looked up. What others? The rest. The ones Alice wrote about. He tilted his head. You think this is about Alice? Clara stepped closer. I think this is about power. And men who think silence is loyalty. He chuckled. You sound just like her. No, Clara said. I want you gone. He didn't flinch. Levy was waiting outside the jail when she left. He held her coat, handed it over without a word. She put it on slowly. The air had turned sharp, biting through her sleeves. Daisy's sleeping, she said. Miriam's watching her. He nodded. They walked in silence down the main road. Dry Creek was quiet, only the wind moved, dragging tumbleweed across the dust. When I came here, Clara said, I thought it'd be a way to disappear. Start over. Levy looked at her. Still want that? No, she said, not anymore. They reached the edge of the pasture. The burned coral still blackened and broken. She turned to him. You knew something was off. You let it fester. And now, I want it cleaned. Burned out root and stem. Clara exhaled. Then help me. With what? Whatever comes next. The next morning, news of Thorne's arrest spread fast. By noon, a group of men had gathered outside the jail, ranchers' fathers. A few women with tight faces and knives in their belts. Hank stood on the porch. Trial's set. He called. Tom Stone judge'll be here in 5 days. A voice from the crowd shouted back. He won't make it 5 hours. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Clara stepped up beside Hank. This won't be fixed by another secret, she said. Let the law handle it. You think the law protected the last ones? Someone yelled. Another man pushed forward. You let him live, he'll rot 5 years and walk out. You know it? Clara's voice rose. If you kill him now, you bury the truth with him. The crowd wavered. Hank stepped forward, one hand on his revolver. You want justice, stand down. You want revenge, try me. It was enough for now. They left, slow and angry, but they left. That evening, Clara sat on the porch of the bunkhouse. Daisy sat beside her, wrapped in Miriam's old quilt. The girl spoke first. You think it'll stop? Clara looked at the horizon. No. But maybe it won't start again so easy. Daisy nodded. I read your page, Clara said. Daisy's hands tightened on the quilt. But you didn't. No. I hoped someone would find it. Clara reached over and took her hand gently. Someone did. For a long time. They sat in silence, then Daisy said, voice low. He wasn't the only one who knew. Clara turned to her. Who? The girl swallowed. I saw someone else. Watching. Didn't speak, just stood behind the barn one night. Had a badge. Clara's chest tightened. A badge. She stood up slowly. Stay here. She crossed the yard and found Hank inside the jail, cleaning his rifle. He looked up. She talk. She did. He wiped the barrel. What'd she say? She saw someone else. Watching. Hank set the rifle down. You believe her? Clara nodded. She said he had a badge. He paused, then leaned back. Then we've got a bigger problem, he said. Because I'm not the only badge in Dry Creek. Clara turned and saw the second deputy's horse. Already saddled and gone. Clara rode hard through the sagebrush, wind slapping against her face, eyes fixed on the trail ahead. The tracks were fresh. Hoofprints heavy and deep, heading north out of Dry Creek toward the old mining road. She didn't need a name. She already knew Deputy Lyle, quiet, polite. Always just close enough to hear things he shouldn't, always around when something needed forgetting. He was the second shadow in Daisy's story. The one who never touched, only watched, only enabled. The wind howled harder as she crested the ridge. Below, a figure on horseback kicked up dust, weaving toward the canyon fork. She didn't slow. At the bend, she fired once into the air. The rider jerked around. Lyle's face was pale even from a distance. He didn't reach for his gun. Just held his hands up like that might mean something now. Clara kept her revolver low. You ran. Because I knew what it'd look like. She dismounted, boots crunching gravel. It looks like you let him keep them. I didn't touch those girls, he said quickly. I swear to God. You knew where he took them. You let him disappear them. You helped file papers in close cases. He swallowed hard. They were already gone. What was I supposed to do? Tell the truth. I had a badge. That truth would have burned me with it. Clara stepped closer. So you stood still while he burned them instead? Lyle looked away. You're not the worst of them, she said, but you're the reason they got away with it. His voice cracked. I didn't know it'd go that far. It always goes that far, Clara said, holstering her gun, the second you look away. They rode back in silence. When they reached Dry Creek, Hank met them in the yard, rifle in hand. Clara handed Lyle down. He won't run again. Hank stared at the man who'd stood beside him for years. Go inside, Hank said. Sit down. Say nothing. Lyle nodded once and vanished through the jail door. Hank turned to Clara. You gonna stay? I'm thinking about it. You should, he said. This place doesn't need more ghosts. 2 days later, the judge came up from Tombstone. He didn't ask many questions. The journal, the ledger, the brand, all laid out on the table like cold truth. Daisy sat beside Clara, silent but steady. When asked to speak, she said only 6 words. I want him gone. That's all. The verdict came swift. Thorne was sentenced to hang. Lyle was stripped of his badge and held for obstruction. Neither man protested. The town of Dry Creek watched the gallows rise without ceremony. No jeering, no celebration. Just quiet reckoning. On the day of the execution, Clara didn't go. She stayed with Daisy on the porch of the bunkhouse. The girl held a cup of tea, hands no longer shaking. He's really gone? She asked. Yes, Clara said. Daisy looked out at the dry fields. So why doesn't it feel over? Clara didn't answer. Some things don't end. They just stop continuing. Weeks passed. The corral was rebuilt, the fields planted late, but steady. Levi rode north to sell off surplus stock. When he returned, he brought Clara a new coat. Warm, stitched leather, better for winter. She took it without a word, but wore it the next day. Daisy started walking the property on her own. She fed the chickens, cleaned the tack, even taught one of the colts to follow her around the yard. Sometimes she smiled, not often, but sometimes. Miriam stayed on longer than planned, just until the frost breaks, she said. Then she stayed through the spring. Dry Creek got quieter, but not smaller. One morning, Clara stood at the edge of the pasture, looking out at the hills. The wind was soft, the kind that didn't carry warning. Levi came up beside her, holding 2 cups of coffee. He passed one over. She took it, sipped. You think we'll ever be done with all this? He asked. No, she said. But I think we'll know what to do when it starts again. He looked at her. You staying? She nodded. If you'll have me. He smiled. I never asked you to leave. She looked out at the land again. It was still harsh, still full of ghosts. But it was also hers now, not because someone gave it to her, but because she'd stayed, fought, chosen. Some scars you carry, some you walk into willingly, knowing what they cost. She turned to him. I'm not going anywhere. Later that afternoon, Daisy came running from the road, breathless and red-faced. There's someone at the gate, she called. A girl. Clara and Levi met her at the fence. There, on the other side, stood a child no older than 10, clothes dusty, eyes wide and guarded. Behind her, a man on a mule waved his hat. She's yours now, he said. Said she don't talk much. But she's clever. Clara crouched. The girl didn't speak. Clara smiled gently. That's all right, she said. We'll learn each other slow. She reached out a hand. The girl hesitated, then took it. Clara stood, holding her hand, and for the first time in a long time, the wind felt like something she could breathe.